Welcome back, and thank you for still staying with us. If you're just joining the program, this is Cosmopolitan Market reaching you live from the Nigeria Customs Broadcasting Network. My guest is now with me in the studio. He is Akachukwu Okafor. He's a principal partner at Change Partners International. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Christine.
It's good to have you join us on the program today. So much has, I guess so much has really happened in the renewable energy sector from the year 2023, and I've not seen you in a long while, so I guess you have to calibrate for me everything that has really happened in that sector from 2020 to 2021. What has been happening?
A lot has been happening, particularly with projects implemented by government through the Rural Electrification Agency. There had been series of projects implemented based on the categories and schemes they have. They are all under the Nigerian Electrification Project, which is a World Bank-assisted project to electrify Nigeria. It's a component of the Power Sector Recovery Plan. So far, the REA had done a good job in energizing universities, energizing markets and communities. But I think it would be appropriate to provide a time scale of how we've got to where we are. And I would like to say also that Nigeria's renewable energy sector is not protected from the normal challenges you have with development in Nigeria, particularly with political economy of projects. And so far, so good. In Jos, Plateau State in 2016, the National Council on Power provided a policy that stated that renewable energy will contribute 30% of Nigeria's electricity generation by 2030. But it's good to note that before then, we had renewable energy contributing, or stated in policy to contribute 1.3% by the year 2015, and it moved from 1.3% to 16% by 2030 before a review was done of the National Renewable Energy Action Plan to get it to 30%. And that policy was approved by the National Council of Power in 2016. So that is the context so far. And on the private sector, a lot has been happening with decentralized projects, mini grids all around the country and all of that. But when we come to the actual analysis of those projects, it will be a totally different thing. But based on face value of projects implemented on the ground, there's been a lot of improvement.
I want to also, still sticking with how the sector has fared so far. Now, 2020 was an unprecedented year for a lot of us, extraordinary year. COVID, the Hydra-headed monster COVID came in and still taking its toll on economies around the world, and Nigeria is not exempted. Now, how did the sector navigate that storm? But probably, I was reading an article and they were like, it was a blessing in disguise. I don't know if that's true though.
The sector has survived. It's becoming more resilient, but we've got a lot of challenges. We've got the FX is a huge problem. I mean, just like I said, the renewable energy sector is not protected. There was a review of VAT sometime last year in June, and unfortunately, the renewable energy sector was not exempted from that VAT review. And the sector was thinking that government would use that opportunity to exempt the renewable energy sector because of the critical role that renewables was having in energizing hospitals at the time and providing electricity for the population. Because you remember it was at that period that there was a thinking on how possible is it to provide Nigerians with free electricity for a couple of months.
Yes, I remember, just like what also happened in Ghana at some point.
Yes. So based on that, the sector didn't get the protection the sector was thinking it will get from government. But so far, one thing that happened also, it's beamed a light on the deplorable state of health facilities in terms of, because you can run primary health care centers or general hospitals without electricity. So what has happened is that government had is now paying more attention to hospitals, healthcare centers, and interestingly, through the support of development partners, government, through the area, has a project, a program it calls Beyond COVID, which would provide, which will now make it possible for health systems to be included in its energizing projects, because before it was all about education and markets, economy. So I think so far good, but a lot of progress would have been made if an enabling environment, a more enabling environment was provided.
Now, talking about enabling environment for sector players to thrive in that sector. Now, let's look at barriers.
Yes.
Let's look at barriers that have hindered or hampered the level of growth we should expect. We see other climes actually thriving in terms of clean energy, renewable energy.
Yes.
And a good number of the other parts of the world are saying we want clean energy. The world, climate change is doing so much harm to the world. Now, what are some of the barriers that have been recurring? Before we move to if there have been solutions at all.
Right. One of the strongest barriers to adoption of new technologies globally is the procurement structure or standards that is in place for such technologies, the regulation. And for Nigeria, the biggest barrier we've had is the standards of the technologies that come in for development of renewables in Nigeria. VAT and duties on renewables was increased. Of course, there was an increase in VAT from 5% to 7.5%. It's affecting the sector. Elsewhere, what government normally does is to reduce duties and VAT for such sectors that are new, that it wants to grow. Yeah. It sends a signal to investors and players locally that government is interested in driving this sector. So that is one barrier. The sector in the past couple of years have been pushing for government to reduce the VAT for these sectors, but for the sector rather. But it suffers from the challenge of what is declared at the borders, classification and categorization of what is renewable and what is not renewable. For instance, for batteries, I mean, one can be importing batteries for some other activity that is not related to renewable, and then it's documented in the import documents as for renewable. So it has those challenges. Then, in terms of the standards also of the imports, the technologies, you have a lot of substandard equipments coming in. I don't know how much the Standards Organization of Nigeria is doing to ensure that I don't know, it's a difficult one to ensure that we have quality products coming in. Because what this fake and substandard equipment does is that for a person that has brought out money to pay for deployment of these solutions, once it goes bad, he or she has a bad story about renewable. He tells that story to another person. If it's in a household or in an organization, that is their story of renewables. So it kills the market. It doesn't drive growth. in the market. Then outside of what happens in the standards of the technologies, another one is the procurement. Around the world, government is the biggest procurer of goods and services. And what they do with that procurement structure is to set the standards of installations that happen. And when government does that, it helps regulate what happens. But what we found in Nigeria is lack of those procurement standards that ensure that the quality of installation projects remains what it should be. And most of, for instance, street lights, not just government also, not just government, private sectors that that procure services. What this does is that when installations are not done based on procurement standards of ensuring that quality equipment are used, it tells that same story of a bad renewable energy sector, because it's a different thing from importing those fake, any businessman importing the fake equipment or substandard. But it's another for government to, or any other client that is contracting a firm to do installations, to say, hey, I'm not going to use those things. So if those equipment, bad and fake substandard equipment are imported, if there is no supply, if there is no demand rather, it definitely kills the supply. So it's a push and pull.
So there's procurement challenge on one hand, and there's the issue of standard. I totally agree with the point you've raised on standard, because then again we're
and financing.
Go ahead,
I didn't say that. Financing.
Is that like the big elephant in the room?
Well, it is a big elephant, because no matter how grand your ideas, no matter how brilliant or innovative your solution may be, if you don't have financing to deploy them, to test them in the market, then you are going nowhere. Yes, it's a big problem. I've talked about the FX challenges, because most of the investments coming in are dollar denominated. And when you get investments that are short-tenured, 5 years, 7 years, you can't do anything with it at the interest rates at which we borrow from the commercial markets. Really, for a sustained growth or development of the sector needs long-term investments coming in 20 years with single digit of 3% interest rate. That is when companies can make significant investments, invest in capacity building and technology research and development that will drive the sector.
Yeah, now I'm glad you mentioned the part of investing in technology research and development. Now, while you were talking about some of the barriers that the sector is facing, what's kept on reoccurring was the fact that we bring a lot of these things from outside the country.
Yes.
Let's look at building local capacity. Are there conversations around that?
Yes. For every other sector aside the renewables, we have the local content. The president some time ago signed the executive order 5 on local content. But, you know, we have got a lot of beautiful policies in this country. The problem is implementation. So when, and it goes back to the psyche of any average Nigerian. We don't trust locally made goods. We prefer imported goods. And the reasons are very obvious, because we know that it's, I mean, if I'm buying this, it's not value for money. So it affects the sector in terms of people not trust, or companies or clients that want to contract solutions not to buy made in Nigeria, because we've got solar, made in Nigeria solar panels. But when you also look at the economics of scale of production, the factors of production in Nigeria, they are very high. You'd easily want to get your solar panels from China or from Europe or from the US. And when you look at the technology itself, the batteries, the inverters, you prefer to get a solution that you know that had passed through all the certification that is out there, international standards, so that you don't have the stories of the equipment has packed up and probably the technology was still at the development stage before it got to market. So when it comes to local content, I think government and private sector will need to develop a strong framework for research and development. When you go to India, unfortunately, these are discussions that we are not having in the renewable energy space. By 2030, 2050, Nigeria will be one of the biggest consumers of renewable energy products. And we haven't got a robust research and development to tap into the benefits.
Yeah.
If you listen to the President Joe Biden, he talked about the money, what will come to the U.S. when they sell renewable energy technologies to other countries, and who is going to be the buyer? It's Nigeria, obviously. So the earlier we understand that this is a big market, that if we invest in research to develop our products, we've got the manpower, we've got the funding. If we want to really tell ourselves the truth, we've got the human capital to do all of these things. It's what is called political interest. We haven't got required political interest to think about this, and we have other African countries that will be buying from us. We've got after had taken off. You imagine the huge potential for Africa, and mind you, by 2030, 2050, Africa, 5 African countries would contribute 50% of global population. Those countries are Ethiopia, Congo DR, Uganda, Nigeria, and which are the country? One of the countries in Eastern Africa. And human population means there will be human activities, there will be need for electrification and all of that. So those are areas that we are not paying attention to. And other countries are very strategic in developing their R&D and shipping all these equipments to us. So we've got to change the balance. We shouldn't be just a consuming nation. We should be producing what we need. And I think that's when the sector can make a maximum growth, achieve maximum growth.
In all of what you have said, I think there's the importance of a synergy between the public and private sector cannot be overstated in this case. How would you appraise that? Because for all of this to happen, R&D, to get commitment from talking about political interest, for all of this to happen, there needs to be some kind of significant commitment from the public sector especially, because then again, the private sector can only be players. Like you said, a good number of funding can come from the public sector to ensure that things start happening.
Yes.
How would you appraise the synergy, the level of synergy between the public and private sector, especially with regards to propelling growth in the renewable energy sector?
You know, elsewhere, you've got, within the universities, you have hubs where solutions, R&D happens, and those solutions are incubated and they become products that are sold. But unfortunately here, you know what problem we've got with closure of our universities. So that is a different story. So the problem is we haven't got the ecosystem that we need to drive to even initiate this synergy. If a private investment is going to come in from government, where is it going to go? We don't have an educational system.
Basically like a foundation that even this can thrive
that
on.
will absorb the funding and sustain the research and drive it. So, those are the fundamentals. Before you call people to sit down on the table and say, hey, we've got this funding, I think there is an interesting research happening on so and so, let's put money in it and see how it grows. until we address the problems we have with Nigeria's educational sector, we are going nowhere. And unfortunately, you know, our society is interconnected. We seem to, in Nigeria, we seem to treat our educational sector, healthcare sector, economy as different entities.
Yeah.
But they're all interconnected. If you have a poor educational system, you're going to have a poor health system. Same with every other sector. So when we start paying sincere attention to education in Nigeria, we'll be discussing this 2050, 2000.
Because then again, we want to build a knowledge-based economy. We cannot do that without having the education system functioning optimally. Now, let's look at the projection of 30%
Yes.
of electricity supply from renewable at 2030. Is that a tall order?
I would say yes, but it's not even ambitious.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's another angle to it.
Yes, it is. It is not ambitious because we've got a population that is growing. When we had that 30% target, that was in 2016. I can't remember what that population was. It was around 170, 180, but we know our population today. Right. And that review was an outcome of the need for Nigeria to make a commitment to the Paris Agreement, to our national determined contributions. Because the Paris Agreement was in 2015, and we had this review of our target from 16% to 30% in 2016.
Yes.
And Nigeria is expected to improve on that target by 2020. Every other country, there was a climate summit just last Christmas in December, where other countries improved on their commitments. Well, outside the commitments that we have to make to combat climate change, we owe it on ourselves to develop policies and targets that would help us solve the problems we have. Unfortunately, it is difficult to actually know how much the capacity, installed capacity of renewables in Nigeria, because elsewhere it's very easy to do because they have a grid that is already working. Net metering is in place, and they have the feed-in tariff. So what happens if you are generating? It's going onto the grid, so the grid is able to know which is renewables and which is from either gas or hydro or other forms of energy generating technologies. But what we got here, it's a grid that is not stable, is not efficient, so it's difficult to know how much of generation that we have achieved. MBET tried sometime to do this in 2016 as well, when federal government signed an agreement, power purchase agreement with 14 companies. They were to produce 1,125 megawatts, but that project hasn't taken off yet. Every other thing we have with energizing economy, energizing education as we have them, very huge improvements, significant improvements that we have made. But we can't really aggregate these. This is just on the REA. State governments are doing their thing, the private sector people are doing their thing, but we can't, as a country, assess ourselves on where are we on this 30%. And like I said, we have made an improvement, but the 30% is not ambitious enough. Sometime in 2016, all these things have been 2016.
Yeah. And we're in 2021.
Yes, we are in 2021. The vice president said that 50% of Nigeria's electricity generation by 2030 will come from renewable energies. So by 2020, that was last year.
Yeah.
and 50%. But on January 6th, this was the time we generated our maximum capacity from the grid. That was 5,552.80 megawatts of electricity. We can't account for the renewable energy contribution to that. So the challenge, before you can assess yourself how well you are doing, you should know what is happening. So at the moment, in as much as we can see significant progress on the ground, but you can't really know how good you are doing at that, because you don't know if you're at 15%.
So is it a data issue?
It's a data issue, it's a coordination, lack of coordination problem, because we don't have a platform, a dashboard, for instance, where you can click on and see what inputs have come from the state governments. We should have something like that, like a dashboard, if we are interested in knowing how far we've gone. I mean, on that template, state governments can post whatever they have generated in the year. From the private sector, it feeds in. Maybe at the end of the month, with a click of a button, you can say, oh, from decentralized, because none of the renewables are on the grid, you can say from decentralized, this is how much we have achieved. And we can account for it in our overall energy generation. Because if you report on Nigeria's energy generation, they will tell you that gas is supplying 83 point something percent, and hydro is doing 17 points. So where is the renewable
in between? I think that's very, very critical point you have mentioned there. I also want to speak to the issue of technology now.
Yes.
And technology in the essence of, we've seen good strides in the technology sector recent times, and we have a lot of Nigerians playing exceptional in that space. Now, how can we achieve a nexus now between renewable and having tech-supported solutions? I don't know. How can we ensure that that works, basically? Now, tapping into the potentials of technology to also help develop the renewable sector.
I don't know if you want me to really comment on that. We're all in this country, and we know what has happened in the last couple of weeks when it comes to technology, when it comes to means of trade and payments elsewhere. I mean, technology is a driver of development. Sure. When you use policies to stifle technology, you're gonna make no progress. I'll use an example. By 2010, 2012, Kenya, folks went into Kenya and they had this Safaricom mobile money and all that. It's well researched of how mobile money has helped renewable energy development in Kenya and East Africa as a region. During the same period, what happened here in Nigeria was a reverse of regulation. In Kenya, what the government did was to leave the sector to develop and now regulate. In regulating technologies, there are different ways of regulating technologies. And the best way is to let the market evolve and see what's happening. And now have the players self-regulate. Because, mind you, technology is faster than regulation. We can see what is happening around the world with Facebook, Twitter, and they need to regulate them, in quotes. So, but what Nigeria did, Kenya left its market to develop and now see ways to regulate within the boundaries of their development. But what happened in Nigeria? The central bank, unfortunately, said Nah, we're not going to allow this technology to develop as it's developing elsewhere. And what's Nigeria's mobile money story? It hasn't developed. And this would have helped Nigeria develop significantly in its renewable energy sector, in its healthcare systems, in education. Because, I mean, if you have a device that you can use to make payments for everything that you need, it helps solve a lot of problems. And based on your question, it's very difficult for us to have that conversation when government doesn't see the need to allow technology to evolve as it should, and now have the players regulate themselves and set the guidelines for operation. So as far as we have the kind of understanding or perception we have with technology, because technology, we've entered the realm of the age of the fourth industrial revolution. You talk about big data, artificial intelligence, what have you, the cryptos and
blockchain and all
blockchain.
that.
Yeah, thank you. You cannot stop technology. And technology, drones and all that, technology has potential for good and potential for evil. It's left for government to see that the evil doesn't, increase. And once you start regulating in a manner that constricts the development of that technology, that is when people will be incentivized to use technology for evil.
Okay, now let's talk about affordability of renewable energy, because I've had conversation with people and you'll be like, okay, how about you use solar energy instead of depending on the conventional power supply? Exactly, you just hit the nail on the head. Is renewable energy affordable?
It is affordable.
How affordable is it?
It is affordable. Why do I say so? Ordinarily, it is affordable. What we have, the FX is a huge problem, as I've told you. Another problem that, when in any market, what gives investors the confidence to put their money on the table is government policies. When there is inconsistent policies, investors are not ready to put their money on the table. And what happens when an investor is not ready to put his money on the table on a long term? He wants what? Immediate returns.
Yes.
So for a product that you normally pay over, say, 7 years, the investor will want to get his investment back in 3 years because he doesn't know what is going to happen with the next administration. So everywhere around the world, this is not just a Nigerian issue. Investors are interested to know how the next administration, what is their view of the policy. Around the world is 5 years, 4 years. That cycle affects everything that is done. But in some other countries, it is more stable. In terms of policies are more stable. Investors are confident that for the next 10 years, this policy is going to be there, we'll make our investments. But here, once you have an investor who is ready to cash out in 3 years, a product that you would have gotten for 5 naira, for instance, you get it for 7 naira. And if you are going to make that payment comfortably over the next 6 years, you know how much more you have to pay to get it. And then, elsewhere, you have a system whereby some banks have tried to provide those schemes. The way we apply for loans to get a car, we haven't started seeing them with the renewables. do an installation for me and I'll pay over 4 years or whatever, or just like you have a mortgage. It hasn't started happening because of the challenges we have with the sector, but it is affordable, but is not cheap. It's expensive.
Okay, it is affordable, but it is not cheap. Many would not want to agree with you on that, especially.
They should listen to the experts.
Okay. Just as we round off the program now, let's
Yes.
round off with having your outlook for the sector in the year 2021. What's the future of energy in this year?
Interesting. Well, I'll provide scenarios. When you are doing this, you have to provide scenarios. Scenario one, it will go bad. It will not be. It will not. There won't be a significant improvement because there is another aspect of the sector that we don't discuss: the sustainability of projects. You know, when a plane is taking off, it looks like it's making a lot of improvement, but when it hasn't got what it needs, like the map of where it's going, you now find out when there is need for it to land that it hasn't got an airport to land, or the weather is bad. So that is what is happening in Nigeria at the moment. There is a lot of improvement, fine and good, but the sustainability of projects that are being implemented, things that have to do with, and sustainability also has to do with the manpower to continue maintaining these, how to manage the, what do you call it, the batteries and all of those things that will be phased out, and the panels, and the cost of replacing panels, for instance, and batteries and all of that. Those really come up in the procurement that I talked about, or the planning. So to answer quickly, 2021, if FX remains where it is or continues going up, then it will be more difficult for persons like you and I, or businesses, to go solar. And then electricity tariff is up, fuel prices up.
Okay.
But these are good for the sector, because when people are not interested in buying more fuel for their generators, then they might think solar, something more sustainable. But then you will not remove the feedback or the input of fuel economy that will run. Another scenario will be a scenario where we have our FS come down, government probably exempt to renewables from paying VAT, and other incentives that could be provided, and then it can grow. But we need to address the sustainability of our renewable energy development.
Okay, thank you so much, Akachukwu Okafor. He is the principal partner at Change Partners International. Thank you for coming on the program today.
Always a pleasure.
And it is with that we wrap up the program today. Thank you for investing your time with us. I hope you have been able to take one or two things. Akachukwu rightly said that renewable energy is affordable, but it is not cheap. He will explain to me what that means after we wrap up the program. Let's also remember that today is the big day at the WTO. We expect the World Trade Organization to affirm Nigeria's own former finance minister as the Director General of the WTO. She will be the first woman to hold that position and the first African to hold that position. So a lot of Nigerians are saying our Ashwebi are in place already, set for that humongous feat that is expected to take place about 3 p.m. Nigerian time. Trust us to bring you updates on that. My name is Christiana Amodu. Remember to stay safe. COVID-19 is still out there. Please take responsibility. Have a great day ahead.